Hello YouTube and welcome back to Fernando Comics. If my voice sounds a little weird, it's because I'm getting over a cold. This video is going to be a little different than usual, but for good reason. The first reason is if I don't vary my content, YouTube every now and then tries to take me outside and old yeller me. But the official reason is because I saw a video that I just couldn't let it slide. Look, I don't talk shit, and I don't think it helps anyone. And that's not what we're going to do. But as someone with such a low pressure job as being a comic book YouTuber, I think that the very least we can try to do is be right about the stuff that we're saying. Especially when you're a big channel. Mine is little big. I have the best commenters and subscribers on YouTube, point blank. And I'm friends with some of you in real life just because we came in contact through YouTube. But my channel is, relatively to the bigger channels, still pretty small. So the big channels need to be even more on top of it because they have a bigger reach. And that's why we're going to pick apart a video that I watched from a very small indie channel named Comics Explained. Every time there's an inaccuracy or a falsehood, we're going to put it on a scoreboard. The first 2-ish minutes of the video are tangent to the point, so we're going to skip those. But right off the bat, boom, title is wrong. Storm doesn't dominate Thor. And I get the nature of the game with video titles, trust me. I have my own questionable titles, but the opposite of what happened is what's being put in the title. This is like titling your video, Ares destroys the Sentry, because Ares managed to like tickle the Sentry's side in one panel.
The things he says is like, I have fought alongside Asgard for eons, right?
Yeah, so Vader has not fought with Asgard for eons. In universe, he probably hasn't even fought with Asgard for even 30 years, because he's not Asgardian. He was created. Beta Ray Bill's first appearance was in Thor number 337 in the Walt Simonson era. So it's been around for a while, since 1983 in real time, but that's still probably less than like 30 years in comic time. In fact, looking it up, it's closer to 10 to 15 years.
Storm. Thor ends up traveling to Arakko because again, Storm during the X-Men Red comics at the moment is kind of in the midst of this gigantic Genesis war.
Thor didn't travel there, he teleported Storm out of there. Otherwise, why would Storm ask him to send her back if they're still there?
What's going on between the mutant populations. And so the result of this is that the crows of Thor literally appear and say, "You are summoned," and just like snatch her up.
Ah yes, the famous and mythological Odin's crows. Who could forget? Odin's mighty crows.
Right, and just teleport her directly to Thor. Now at this point, you have the two of them who are seemingly on the moon. And the result of this is that Storm's like, you better return me back home, man, because like I have some serious stuff going on, right? But what ends up happening here is Thor's ravens appear to Storm and are just like, you've been summoned. And they
Oh, okay, he corrected it. Maybe it was just a little slip of the tongue last time. We will reel that one back on the scoreboard for him.
And so he just basically tells like the lightning, stop hitting me, right? Stop striking me. And it does. It ends. Like it literally stops. And the funny thing here is when Aurora's just like, why? He's like, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the lightning. He's like, the lightning answers to me as much as it answers to you, right? I command the lightning. And that's kind of been a big question a lot of people have, right? Like if Storm commands the lightning and Thor commands the lightning, who wins on that little scuffle?
Ooh. Objectively, no one has ever had that big question. Only people who don't read the material. And once they do, I would say it becomes pretty clear, right? Thor is a deity of the storm. And while that doesn't always translate to being superior to mutant abilities, in this case, Thor has feats of storm control that are not matched by a mutant, such as storms within environments that cannot produce natural weather, mystical storms that are impassable by any force Earth can produce due to his elder god heritage, cosmic storms that are otherwise outside of the scope of Storm's abilities to control, and instantaneous planetary storms that he can sense his opponents through and attack them individually from any point on the planet with them. To name a few, there are way more.
Right, and Storm literally says, you command the storm, Thor, I command the weather, and not as a king on a throne, but I command it as an equal. And this right there just kind of like solidifies who would win in a fight between the two, right? Like,
no, it doesn't. That's all.
With Thor, it's brute strength, lightning, and that's more or less it. He does kind of command the weather to a degree, but not on the same level that Storm does. And Storm's ability to increase the pressure around him, all that kind of stuff, she'd easily be able to take on Thor. I don't know if she'd be able to do.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you were rushing the script and decided to pad for time by just saying whatever came to mind. All Thor can do is be strong and use lightning? Did you learn about Thor off the back of the popcorn bucket you got from Love and Thunder? And if that's what the author's implying, he's wrong too. No excuses. Thor is up there with the most versatile characters in either of the big companies of Marvel and DC precisely because of how much he has shown to do. Mjolnir is standard equipment for him, and thus he can teleport, absorb energy, erase memories, rearrange molecules, cancel spells, track energy, etc, etc, etc. And if for some reason you'd like to split Thor from the weapon he's carried for like 99% of his comics, Thor himself is also a master of weather control, who used to flood Asgard as a baby when he cried. He can summon pinpoint lightning so hot it can reforge Mjolnir. He can heal even grievous wounds within moments, essentially, is super fast, super durable, and can use the God Blast all without his hammer. He can also whip up magic storms and make it rain fire even without Mjolnir, as I had mentioned a little earlier in the video.
Weather to a degree, but not on the same level that Storm does. And Storm's ability to increase the pressure around him, all that kind of stuff, she'd easily be able to take on Thor. I don't know if she'd be able to destroy him or kill him, but she would certainly hold the upper hand for quite a bit of time. So,
you see, the good thing about reading these comics and not skimming them is that you run into little tidbits like this from Contest of Champions 2 back in the day. They've already fought, and Storm threw just about everything elemental she could at him, which made Thor smile, and then he knocked her out with a kiss.
I want to know from you guys, who do you think would actually win in this? Now, where this is...
You're talking to talk. If Storm comes at Thor with the intentions to hurt him, and Thor reciprocates, she will be turned into a fine mist. Thor can tell her lightning to stop hitting him. She cannot do that to Thor's lightning. All mutants have stronger than average physical stats, but Storm is pretty damn close to human. And while she's incredibly powerful in her own right, she is Thor if Thor had no noticeable superhuman durability, no magic weapon, less experience, less nobility, and had an X gene that could be tampered with to leave her powerless.
Who do you think would actually win in this? Now, where this is kind of like the end of the fight between the two, do not let that deceive you, because this story gets crazy. So what ends up happening here is he says, who's stronger, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? And he says, the question those like us are always asked, who is stronger? Can I arm wrestle the Hulk, run a race with Quicksilver, challenge Willie Lumpkin in an ear-wiggling contest? Right?
I'm adding a point to the board because that wasn't funny and I'm a little annoyed.
Those of you guys who aren't following the Thor mythos right now, Tyrannos is being introduced to us as an elder god, right? This is a guy who basically existed on Earth in its earliest days. Guys like Chthon, right? They're just beings who have been around since the early days of existence. And where most of them were either destroyed, defeated, or took off to other dimensions, this is one of those instances where this guy represents one of these elder gods. And that's where Storm is absolutely like totally flabbergasted. She was like, you summoned me to fight that thing? She's like, you're right. It was urgent.
Now, this isn't a point, but can we just pause for a moment? Storm attempted to rupture Thor's eardrums before she even listened to what he had to say. Like, what a psycho, right? Is there something that Thor has done to you in the past that would suggest he might be untrustworthy? Very weird. Even if she was stressed from a legitimate situation, you shouldn't do that to a friend. That was way over the top.
Right, and one of the things he tells her is that when she says, if you don't have your hammer, you cannot be Thor, his response is, no, I have my own power now. Because remember, in his training session with Loki, Loki kind of, I wouldn't go as far as to say unlocked a latent ability within Thor, but Loki taught Thor to think outside the box.
Well, you shouldn't, because it's not what happened. He put a challenge in front of Thor, and Thor solved it. That's all.
To be more than just a god that has a hammer and just uses it to hit stuff. So Thor is thinking on a much higher level than he traditionally would. And so where you do have like this whole attack going on between...
Unironically, has never been Thor. this is not new, and you're either just saying things for padding the time limit to 10 minutes, or you just don't know what you're talking about, man. Because his history is full of innovative techniques, intelligent use of his abilities, thought-provoking storylines. This would be your opinion of Thor if all you knew about him was from the Hulk Returns from 1988. Thor was bred to be the answer to the Ragnarok cycle that Odin himself could not solve. He was born a prince with a destiny that was forged between a Skyfather and an Elder Goddess as a means to defy gods that are even higher than that, and he did it. So to be like, oh, Thor's always been all hammer and no brains is really more of a reflection of the person implying that, don't you think?
He opens the portal, Beta Ray Bill emerges, and Beta Ray Bill catches the hammer, right? So it's just like, you can kind of see what's going on here, right? It's being passed around. The hammer's being passed around to different people.
Yeah, man. I did notice that when the hammer was being passed around, that it was indeed being passed around. That is a fair point.
And so in turn, the hammer is held by Beta Ray Bill, is handed to Loki, Loki grabs the hammer, he becomes Thor.
No, he does not. He gets a slice of Thor's powers for a time. Stuff like this is why we have Jane Foster calling herself Thor and acting like it's a superhero name. It is not a superhero name, it is his name. And if you think that's a nitpick, just ask yourself whether Steve Rogers becomes Thor every time he picks up the hammer. Was Hulk Thor when Odin let him lift the hammer? Was Superman Thor? Would they all be Steve Rogers if they picked up the shield?
Like, Storm touches the hammer again, becomes Thor, and then the hammer's thrown to Jane Foster, who arrives as Valkyrie, and she becomes Thor.
One moment.
And so you get like this just ridiculously dope moment where this was the plan of Thor.
Oh man, maybe I'm getting too old for this, but what is ridiculously dope about this?
Ridiculously dope moment where this was the plan of Thor. Like, the plan of Thor was to throw the hammer at Storm to see if she was worthy. And if she was, she would get his powers. Then give...
No, pause, no. Thor chooses who is worthy. Because it's his enchantment now. This is in the series. And it was stated before this comic came out, so you should know. He gave his powers to Storm for a time. He gives it to Tyrannos later. Was he worthy too? The very first appearance of Thor, with his Immortal Thor look, explains how Thor now has the ability to decide worthiness as the owner of the enchantment. And if you are keeping up with the series, as the video would like you to, that really shouldn't be a detail that you miss, because now it's leaked over to your video here and you've spread misinformation. Like Storm being worthy.
To see whether or not he can be worthy, which he is. So now Loki, this really establishes he is a tried and true good guy. Seemingly that's the case. I don't know if I really...
You see what I mean? People listen to this stuff and then they repeat it. Here's the issue right in front of us and why this matters.
Hold, Tyrannos, you could not defeat Thor when he stood alone, and now you face a Thor core, the Thor core. Thor created an army of himself.
It's 5 people, Rob. It's not an army. Could you imagine if the Ninja Turtles got a 5th member? I mean, they'd have an army.
Thor created an army of himself. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. If you need to get caught up on the Thor comics, make sure you guys click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.
No, you're better off reading it yourself at this point. And if you don't have access to comics where you are, shoot me an email and I will send you details of a completely legitimate and legal avenue of reading comic books. Legal and legitimate. Always go through legal and legitimate avenues and support the official release. Just like I do. Look, we all get stuff wrong. It happens. There are a lot of comic books out there. It's close to impossible to keep everything in line. And I would never critique a fan for not knowing stuff or getting the little things wrong. Unless they consider themselves an authority on the subject, because now you're free game. And in this case, Rob seems to be getting a little too comfortable saying just whatever came to mind. But no actual hate or dislike. At the end of the day, this is a very low pressure situation. At least that's what I have to tell myself to avoid becoming terminally online. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching me burst the blood vessel, everyone. I love you all. I will see you in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.